welcome to our Talent Talk series. Today I'm joined by Emma Cusdin for an episode to talk about trans and non-binary inclusion. So welcome. Thank you so much, Emma, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Emma, you're a good friend of Oakleaf, as well as obviously an HR director with a number of years experience across, I think, mostly financial services. And I'm really delighted that you came along to talk to us about this subject today. So before we get started, did you want to tell us a little bit about you, your HR background, and how we know you?
Yes, that would be great. So I'm really delighted to be here. So thank you so much. So I've been in human resources for over 30 years. In fact, the CIPD have just sent me a lovely certificate
Nice.
to thank me for paying their fees for 30 years. And so, as you rightly say, most of it has always been in financial services, and typically in business partner roles, senior leadership roles across different sectors. Typically, banking and insurance have been the two sectors I've worked mostly in, with a little sidestep for 3 years into life sciences, but mainly financial services. So for your listeners, it would be typically those business partnering roles that I've been doing, and typically on global organizations at scale, working matrix areas. I've lived outside the UK and I've worked with businesses around the world, as well as just UK businesses.
Yeah, fantastic. And today we're, you and I started talking when we started talking about Global Butterflies, which is a fascinating organization. And I'm quite keen for you to tell me, and as was everyone else, a bit about Global Butterflies.
Yeah, of course. Global Butterflies is actually my fiance's business that she started 5 years ago. Typically, she started in the legal sector doing trans and non-binary training. And over the last 5 years, we have expanded into trans and non-binary training consultancy, really covering workplaces only. And we work with businesses wherever people are on that inclusion journey. We don't judge. We help and support with humor and lots of practical tips. But we help organizations, whether it's from the boardroom all the way through the organization to the welcome that people have either on the telephone or at reception. And we're really delighted over the 5 years we've grown. And if I look last year at the Stonewall Workplace Equality Index, which is the top 100 of LGBT plus employers in the UK, 18 of our clients are in that top 100. And we're really delighted that out of the top trans employers, we've worked with 3 organisations over a number of years to help them achieve to get to that point. We only work in corporate workplaces. We don't tend to work with third sector or government sector, although we often get asked, mainly because of our lived experience. All our people are trans or non-binary, and all have corporate backgrounds. So for us, that really resonates with our clients that we can bring sector expertise as well as that lived experience into their workplaces.
Yeah, that makes a big difference, isn't it? Because you can talk in their language as well and kind of make things understandable for corporate environments. So from a personal perspective, how has being an openly trans woman impacted your career?
Oh, that's a very good question. So if I think of sort of the positives, I was actually working outside the UK when I decided to transition, and so came home, and I was working for the Royal Bank of Scotland, who really were so supportive in my transition, mainly because they listened and they asked me what I wanted, and just supported me as a human being, wanting that help and support. And they were really great in that. I think So that was a massive thing. So when you come out to your line manager, it is a big thing. However we can dress it up, it is a really big thing for people to say, this is me.
Yes.
And my line manager, who I still know and who are still friends, and he's moved on, his words resonated with me for the rest of my life, which is just tell us what you need. Tell us how we can support. And they delivered on that promise. I think from career-wise, I think it's a really interesting question. I think post-transition, my career has probably plateaued a little bit in terms of that, and whether that's because I'm getting older and a bit more grayer, or whether it's because I'm trans, I'm not sure. But
yeah,
we often hear in the trans and non-binary community is that people tend to get to a ceiling and tend not to progress any further forward. You know, we've yet to have a trans or non-binary CEO of a FTSE 250 company here in the UK, so it will come, I'm sure. But I think it is changing, and the companies we work with, a lot of them are now really supportive, and we're especially seeing younger people transitioning and coming out earlier. That's really great green shoots of positivity, I think, in organizations.
What sort of positive and negative effects have you seen, or can you pinpoint?
I think positively is society is changing. Yeah, people's attitudes and thoughts are changing. I think, you know, this year in 2020 has been a watershed year for inclusion on many levels. You know, in the Black Lives Matter situation, which is long overdue as a conversation in organizations, has really propelled diversity and inclusion to the top of many corporate agendas.
Yes.
And that's long overdue, but it's a real opportunity for people to say, actually, humans come in so many different varieties that actually, if we all looked like each other, that would be one really boring and dull.
Yes.
And two, I wouldn't want to work with me and 10 people like me, because that would be really dull and boring. So I think the positivity is that society is changing and attitudes are changing. I still think there are certain areas where people struggle. And, you know, we need to respect that struggle, but help people on that journey.
Yes. Yeah. Fantastic. So, why do you think LGBT plus inclusion, and more specifically trans and non-binary inclusion, matter to organisations?
I think they matter and I think it's a great question, a number of areas. So purely from a customer perspective, we know there are LGBT people in society who buy your products. Yeah. So if you don't show that you're inclusive, they will go and probably buy their products elsewhere. Yeah. From a HR perspective, in terms of employees and potential employees, if you're not inclusive, and especially LGBT plus inclusive, people will not be at their best at work, so you lose productivity. You will not attract a broad range of talent. And so I think for me, inclusion full stop is really powerful. LGBT candidates, and there's studies that show LGBT plus candidates are looking for real positive signals and signs of inclusion from organizations. Yeah. You know, I joined one particular organization where I found a video that that was on YouTube about 10 years ago that had a trans person on it as a recruitment video. And I, wow, you know, this is pretty good signal and sign.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think for me, you know, you're missing out on talent if you're not inclusive. You're not missing out on diverse thinking and approaches. Yeah. And you haven't got a rich organisation that can help you deliver what you need to deliver. I think for me, the trans non-binary piece is really interesting. You know, studies coming out of the US showing that 12% of millennials identify as trans or gender non-conforming. So, that's 12% of your employees, that's 12% of your customers.
Yes.
And, Gen Z that's sitting underneath that, we think is going to be even more fluid, less binary, and,
Yes.
sees gender in a very different way.
Absolutely. So, and I think, one of the main reasons that you and I wanted to talk about was how, HR professionals can really upskill themselves about the LGBT plus inclusion communities, especially the trans and non-binary issues. So what do you think HR guys can do?
Well, there's so much you could do. We could talk for a long time on this.
I know.
I think if you're in a larger organization where there is an LGBT plus network, go and speak to them. Go and speak to the people who run it, with that positive curiosity, I call it. Go and learn. Go and find out. There are some really great resources out there, both on sort of YouTube and TED Talks. There's some really great videos. If that's how you learn, there's some amazing books, especially for trans and non-binary books. If you have a relationship and if you ask if it's okay to ask questions, speak to somebody who is LGBT plus about their experience, and they will tell you. So find out. And then support your organization, whatever they're doing. I'm a great believer that, we haven't had them this year, the Pride parades, but I'm a great believer that participating in Pride, whether you're LGBT plus or not, is a really great experience. I really missed London Pride this year, because it is a day full of joy and celebration, as well as protest, but it's definitely a really great experience. If you've never experienced it, let's hope next year the London Pride and all the prides around the UK and the globe are run. But just go and march.
Yeah, exactly. And what practical things can people do to be great trans and non-binary allies, especially in the workplace?
In the workplace.
Yeah.
So I think for me, some of it is being just a great human.
That's always a good start, I think.
It's always a good start. But there's some really practical things. So again, if you've got an LGBT plus network, go and support them. If they've got lanyards in the office, wear one. If you hear transphobic banter in the office, step in and say it's not okay. If you talk positively about trans and non-binary people in the office, then it's amazing who can hear that. I'm a great believer of putting pronouns on your signature box, which is a really small thing for you to do as great ally, just to show that you're really respectful. I'm a firm believer that pronouns are going to be part of the handshake of the future. Hello, my name is Emma. My pronouns are she and hers. Great to meet you. I really believe that will happen. So doing them as signatures is a really simple thing to do. I know a number of organizations like to control what's on people's signatures. And we've had a number of conversations with organizations that have had mandated policies. I'm a great believer in going a bit viral and just try it and see what happens. And the final thing for me is always the power of conversations. So if you've learned something from either this podcast or from your TED Talks or from any resources, speak to one person about what you've learned. And I have this image in my head about being a pebble in a pond. You cause a ripple. Because if people don't talk about trans and non-binary issues, those that are trans and non-binary may feel you're negative, and that might be a wrong assumption. But they're looking for a place to work that is safe and respectful. And if we don't talk about these things, then people may make an assumption in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I think that's what's come out of, especially more recent times, is that people are talking more about many topics right now, and it is making a difference. So Before we finish up, and thank you so much for that, can you tell us where we can find more information out about Global Butterflies? Because I'd imagine there'll be lots of information there that people can go to, especially HR people, to
Yep.
to learn more.
Yep. So there's lots of stuff on our website, which has both of the courses and the training that we run and the clients we've worked with. We're equally doing something like this as well. We're doing something called In Conversation, where we're speaking to trans and non-binary people and allies. It's all on our website, which is www.globalbutterflies, that's all one word, .com.
Yep.
We are on LinkedIn. We're also on Twitter. Or people can just drop me an email. So it's emma.cusdin@globalbutterflies.com. And I'd love to hear from people.
That's just been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today.
Good. Yeah, it's been lovely to talk to you. So thank you so much for inviting me in. And as we've said, I love your boat. Your view.
I was hoping that the wind wasn't blowing through my hair as I was doing the interview. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All
right. Thank you.